All right, everybody. This is a hard video, a video that I'm actually nervous to make. I had a brand new client and we did a whole bunch of stuff. We onboarded her. We did all the tests for the heart rate. We did tests for to set her zones, her power zones to get everything dialed in. And we discovered that she had been training and racing um, with undiagnosed leukemia. And so, want to go through here for the next few minutes and just go through like this whole process. Like, how did we discover it? How did we uncover some very interesting anomalies in her, particularly her heart rate data, that said there was something fundamentally wrong that needed to be checked out. For me, heart rate data is absolutely crucial as a coach. I look at it in numerous different ways. I'll go through some of those ways. I've been doing this for a long time, training with data. And I've been coached by very good coaches, coaches who have put world champions on the podium. And it's amazing how, still to this day, how few coaches actually use and really track that heart rate. But for several years, I've been super dedicated to it. I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV, but the heart is unbelievably individualized first, but it gives us so much information in terms of what's going on in the body, right? So when we think about power meters, right, we think about that great technology. Well, that's the stress, okay? But, is the stress causing the strain that we want inside the body? Is it causing too much strain? Is it causing too little strain? Is it causing the right amount of strain? The heart rate is a great indicator for that strain that's going on inside the body. Unless you want to get hooked up to a metabolic cart or something like that, like the heart rate is just absolutely crucial to making sure that we're dialing in the strain, that the stress pairs with the strain. And we actually have lots of tools out there to do this. Let's jump in and let's start looking at some data. Again, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous today on this video. Okay, so basically, this is a zone 2 workout I gave to an athlete. All right, so zone 2 means what? It means zone 2 power. So here's zone 1, here's zone 2, here's zone 3, here would be zone 4, zone 5, zone 6. Okay, so what does his heart rate look like? Heart rate is perfect, right? So his zone 2 watts matches his zone 2 heart rate. So no red flags. And this is one of the first things I look at just to make sure that the watts are coupled with the heart, making sure that they're same thing. And now this takes a little bit of time because we've got to make sure the zones are dialed. We've got to make sure a great test was done with the power meter. And, so this takes a little bit of time working with a new client to get them dialed in. But when they're dialed in, this is where the magic happens. When we have that relationship between watts and heart rate dialed in, this is truly training magic, okay? So, looking at his heart rate, here's bike threshold is up here. We have him set at 183, and here is his warm up zone 2 watts. Nothing, nothing out of the ordinary. And then he warms down a little bit. Again, zone 2 watts matches zone 2 heart. Now, there's lots of different ways that I look at heart rate for everything, and I want to put together a bigger video on all of this, right? So when not only do I study the data, the power data, in an infinite amount of ways, I'm also looking at several key metrics in terms of the heart rate. So first thing, heart rate time in zones. What was the workout? Did the heart rate match the workout? Power to heart rate ratio. This is basically a little more complex metric. we'll get into that. Efficiency factor, that's another great metric that I look at. Cardiac drift, what does the heart do over time as the watts go up or down? What happens? And then, I'm not a physiologist, but there's this thing called, I don't even know what the term is. I can never remember the actual term, but there's cardiac snap. I call it cardiac snap, right? So it's basically what happens when you enter an interval. How long does it take for that athlete's heart rate to match the watts of the interval? Basically how long does it take for him to snap to, right? And so a super fit athlete, once they start nailing an interval, their heart rate will snap faster than, say, an athlete that doesn't have as much fitness. So those are things that, again, I'm going to make a bigger video on all of this. Okay, so let's go to my client. So I got a new client. She comes to me. She's been training. She's been racing. She's a junior client. She has had some success, and so she was just finishing just off the podium, but now she wants to make the podium. She has big goals, right? And so she hires a coach. We bring her on. Whenever I bring on a new client, we do a couple weeks of just really super easy work, or, a week, maybe a week or 2 weeks, depending on their training maturity, and just get to know each other, get our technology dialed in. And then we do the tests, okay? And so we had her dialed in, gave her the standard Andy Coggan 20-minute test. We did a couple of other tests, like a 1-minute test. I had her do some sprint tests and things like that. And so we had her zones super dialed in. And so once we had these zones dialed in, I gave her a zone 2 workout. She nails the watts. Great work, great athlete, nails everything. But then what did we start to notice? That her heart rate, even with all of her zones dialed in, her heart rate is zone 4. Okay, so here's zone 1, 2, 3, and 4. Zone 2 heart, zone 4. This is called decoupling. Okay, so when the heart does not match the watts, that's called decoupling. And it can be quite common in, given certain environmental factors, altitude, heat, stuff like that. It can be quite common to do. So when this happens, as a coach, have all this list of things to go through to work. And so here's her heart rate. Okay, so her heart rate 186. There is nothing abnormal about her threshold heart rate. Like, she's not spiking up to 233, 244. Her heart rate, her threshold heart rate, zone 4 heart rate, looks just like every other single junior athlete that I have. And this is typically where they'll be. They'll be somewhere between 186 and 195 for their threshold heart rate. So what we notice is that she goes straight to threshold. So it's not, she doesn't go to threshold over time and end up at threshold. That when she starts pedaling, doing any kind of effort at all, her heart rate goes straight up. Now, like I said, there's a lot of things that we can look at. Maybe there's incorrect zones. Maybe we tested wrong. Maybe she tested incorrectly, poorly. Maybe the coach messed up, right? Maybe that was a thing. Maybe hydration is an issue. If you're not drinking, then your heart rate is going to shoot up. Same thing with fueling. Maybe there's some workout anxiety going on, right? We talked through all these things. Maybe there's some environmental factors. Maybe where she was training in her room is way too hot. And then, when I went through all of these things and we got all these dialed in, I, very gently, very, very carefully explored, were there some alternate behaviors. Okay, so if she was doing a huge vape, just jacking herself up on nicotine before a ride, that's going to jack up the heart rate. Nicotine is a vasoconstrictor, right? And it's going to jack up the heart rate. So none of those things apply. So the one thing I did next was, okay, so we got some problems. So what I did, I asked her just do a. I prescribed the next workout, the next endurance workout, as in heart rate. So I said, don't care about the watts, don't think about the watts, just keep your heart rate in your zone 2 heart rate and see what happens. All right. So this is what happens with that. So she kept her zone 2 heart rate right here, and it was very hard. She was still going up into tempo. But when we look at her watts are through the floor. Her watts are barely even registering for her to keep the zone 2 heart rate. So what's the thing? This is where we have to have a conversation immediately. So this whole entire time, I've been talking to the parents about letting them know that the heart rate is there's something going on with inside her. The strain in her body is very different from what happens. And let them know right off the bat. And we went through all these things. Once we got done with that heart rate prescribed endurance workout, that's when they took her to the doctor, and then the doctor, she went straight from the doctors straight to the hospital, a very high end hospital. They immediately diagnosed her with leukemia. They immediately gave her a course for the next 3.5 years, chemo protocol for the next 3.5 years, and they immediately started giving her um, the leukemia. The good the good part of this whole thing is that it, because we were using heart rate and she had never trained or raced with heart rate before. The good news is that it was an early stage leukemia. They caught it early. The bad news is that she has leukemia. So use this as a cautionary tale for those of you who are not training with heart rate. Wear that heart rate monitor for every single ride. Wear it for your endurance rides. Wear it in your racing. Always collect that heart rate data. Yeah, and so just always wear that heart rate strap, especially, yeah, no, there's no especially. Just always wear the heart rate data. All right. So, if you want to reach out to me, talk about this information, or talk about your heart rate data. Again, I am not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV, but I definitely can use the software to look at any, hope maybe find some abnormalities or anything like that. My contact information is below, and I would love to talk to you. All right. Take care, everybody.